That's the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Many thanks for making time. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Why corruption as a topic in this particular forum? Perhaps we could start with you.
Well, corruption is the topic that has to be discussed. As we've been seeing in this country, it's a multiple-pronged problem. It goes from our health sector, it goes to our criminal justice sector, it goes to the wildlife, it goes to trafficking. If there's anything that is affecting this country, I think the president has called it a threat on our security. The discussion is very mandatory at this time.
Now, Vanessa, what intrigues about this particular thing is the role that youth are taking in the conference. And it's not just being participants, but also organizing it in terms of the points of discussion, in terms of how to approach this menace that has been stated as, you know, a problem in terms of security and the progress of Kenya as a country and Africa at large. Just tell us about the involvement of youth in this particular conference.
Actually, the young people have been at the forefront of organizing this conference. The idea was from young people, and everything has been led by the young people as well, from the steering committee to the organizing, everything by the young people. And we just want to show that the youth can do much more than just demonstrate. We have the time, we have the energy, and we're about to now channel it towards something meaningful, something fruitful, and something that the future generations will actually thank us for.
Okay, in terms of talking about anti-corruption, sorry to say this won't be the first time that various conferences have set out to talk about this evil in society. What makes this particular conference different in terms of the agenda, what this specific youth will be discussing about?
Well, first, as I mentioned, it is being led by the youth, so I think that is a bit of a new angle. Also, we are going to have an intergenerational dialogue where we want to question the older generation on their actions that have actually led to the menace that we have today. And from this, we hope that we will be able to fill in the gaps, do what that they were not able to do, and will be able now to drive towards a corruption-free country.
Okay, so points of the dialogue will actually generate solutions for anti-corruption. Perhaps, Charity, you can just point out what this dialogue will be centered on, because how do we approach this vice called corruption? Will you target in terms of employment, in terms of the moral dilemma that actually comes up when we actually engage ourselves in corruption vices?
So it is not a simple solution. One of the things that we saw, in fact, in the recent survey, we saw that the young people themselves like corruption. And the reason that they like this corruption is because they have been mentored by the older generation. And what we are thinking is it's time for us to go back and say what happened. In 1963, when we were winning our independence, it was young people who went to Lancaster House. I think President Kibaki must have been 25 years old. And he was there negotiating for the Kenyans. All the people who fought for the freedom of Kenya were young. And if you check any kind of movement that will make any change, has got to be led by young people. Look at Sharpeville massacre. Who were there? Who died? It was the young people. Civil rights movement, young people. So there has to be a point in which they say, this is our future, we own it. When you talk about wildlife, for example, it's disappearing by the day. It is a time when the older generation is taking food from the plate of the younger generation. And they're sitting back and watching. And I think African culture, many times young people have sat back and watched the older people. And you're told, you know, wait your turn. But this is not time to wait your time. And in 1963, they did not wait their time. They stood up and they fought. Now we are asking the young people now, and that's why people like Vanessa are here.
Yes.
We're asking them, it's time for them to take up the mantle of leadership. It's not about tomorrow, it's about today. We have our young people in slavery time, I actually talk about it. They were forced to go to Europe and to America. Now they're taking themselves voluntarily, dying in the ocean to go and work menial jobs.
Exactly.
When this is the richest continent, this is the youngest continent. What has gone wrong? And unless they own it, nobody else is going to own it for them.
Well, it's very proper that you brought out the fact of owning this particular problem. Vanessa, we've seen youth take the back seat in terms of development agendas in various countries, including Kenya. When we talk about the fight against corruption, we've seen there is enough of political support, goodwill, up from the highest seat in the land. Talk about President Uhuru Kenyatta mentioning this as a vice that is greatly affecting the country. Now, when it comes to Africa, the youth Africa is composed of a majority of youth, you know, and speak about taking control of this particular vice and fighting it head on. Apart from this particular conference, I mean, the goal is to actually get youth to talk about this and generate solutions. But what more do you think we should do as youth to actually make sure that we take control of our country? Yes, resources are being taken left, right, and center, but there has to be a future for the youth in this country.
Many a times we hear that the youth are the leaders of tomorrow, but it's about time that we started now. We are not going to wait for us to be given space at the table. We are going to create space for ourselves at the table and generate solutions. Our time is now. And actually, this is just the beginning of a regional youth program that we are developing. So this is just the first step. The conference is just the first step. After this, now we are going to get into action. And then all these ideas that will be generated during the conference, all the solutions that the youth will have come up with, will now be implemented to various projects in the coming years.
Well, we surely hope the action, because that is what has been missing, because we have laws, legislative processes already in hand to take care of this vice. So right after these discussions, what action will we be taking a look at based on whatever will be discussed and decided on at this particular event?
We don't want to have, repetitive conferences where we just speak. We just generate ideas and then it just ends there. So we are going to actually incorporate all these young people and their ideas into meaningful projects, into meaningful, ideas. We're working, it's a multi-sectoral conference. We are involving the private sector, we're involving the government, who are all players when it comes to corruption. So once they present what it is that they have, and we have all these people seated at the table, then it is now up to them to take action, and we will be there to ensure that they actually do what we have proposed them to do.
Now, Charity, in terms of support for the youth who are taking this very commendable initiative to actually take control and fight the war against corruption, in terms of support from the older generation, we know as youth we might be depleted of resources, of positions, of authority. We can do only so much, but in terms of support, it's very important, don't you think? Now, let's communicate about the aspect of support in this particular fight. We've seen the private sector, as she's mentioned, will also be involved, the public sector as well. But it goes a length. It's not just about support, but making sure that whatever is discussed is implemented.
That is true. And one of the things I'd like to say is that the youth are not disempowered.
Okay.
In anything, the youth are the most powerful force that we have. Their power in the form of ideas. And I'd like you to just look at our platforms. We have our Facebook platform, Instagram platform, Twitter platform. The youth are powerful enough to change the situation. I mean, what happened in Tiananmen Square? Who took up the mantle? And this whole, the feeling of helplessness is something that continues to feed the older generation to keep taking from the younger people.
Okay.
If they were to recognize their own strength and recognize their own position, then they'll be able to take it. So for example, we will look at areas, we say, what can you do? What can you do in your own space that can make a change? And it can be done. I'll quote Wangari Maathai, you see a forest fire, you don't just say it's there, I can't do anything. You become that hummingbird with a little bit of water. And you make the change. Okay. And this country has 70% youth. If they were supposed to say, plant trees, do something, hold their leaders accountable. If they were to do that, that in itself will create change.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, many thanks. That is Charity Kagwe, the head of criminal justice at the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the regional office, and Vanessa Kanyaru, the youth consultant at the UNODC. Many thanks. The conference will be happening from the 5th to the 7th.